we have to deal with this 20-day release issue. Right now, the rule is you can only hold a family with a child or a child 20 days. Total, that's the only thing you can hold them 20 days. After that, they have to be released from the country. The cartels and the human smugglers know that rule, and so that's why we've seen from 2014 only 1% of the men bringing a child to now 50% of the men bringing a child. Because they know, bring a child, you'll be released within 20 days. Here's what's different though. In 20 days, we can do our record checks in the United States to say, does this person have a criminal record? But when we contact any of the 63 other countries that these individuals are coming from, just in that sector, most of those countries can't respond to us with their country's criminal record within 20 days. So what's really happening on the border is individuals are coming across with a child, they're being detained for 20 days while we request criminal records from their home country. They're there the 21st day, we have to release them, and then 10 to 15 days later, we get word that individual actually has a murder warrant in their home country. That really happened just a few days ago. Also a few days ago, we released an adult with a child and found out a few days later their home country was seeking them because they were a pedophile in their country. But we just released that adult with a child into our country because we have a 20-day restriction and we can't wait until we get criminal records from another country. That is absurd. We're encouraging the trafficking of children by saying you get into our country no matter what if you just bring a child. And we're encouraging people to come in with a criminal record and bring a child because they know that's their fast track to be able to get in because their home country can't fulfill it fast enough. Why would we do that as a country? Why would we knowingly, willingly do that? We can solve this problem. It's a horrible humanitarian crisis. We need to pay attention to it and be logical about this. Stop saying abolish ICE when what we really need is the ICE facilities to be able to help us be able to detain people in the best possible of environments while we find out what the records are, who they are, who's related to who, and what the background is. Stop ignoring the obvious things. We have some people coming for poverty. We have some people coming to smuggle drugs. Until we can sort that out, we should figure out who's whose. That doesn't seem irrational to me. And we should also find a way to be able to process asylum requests much faster than what we're doing, so that individuals pursuing asylum can go through that request quickly and get processed, and individuals that are gaming the system do not get to game the system. We can do better at this. We have to do better at this. And I would encourage us to be serious about immigration in the days ahead. This Congress can solve this issue, but it won't, because it's just a political game. And when it's about scoring political points rather than solving a humanitarian crisis, people in this body have to decide which one they want to do more. I will never forget last year sitting with a bipartisan group of my colleagues, and as we discussed solutions to immigration, one of my Democratic colleagues said out loud, "I haven't decided what I want to do on this yet. There's an angel on one shoulder saying this problem needs to be solved, and there's a devil on my other shoulder saying this is the greatest political weapon I have against the president. Why would I give it up? And I haven't decided which way I'm going to go yet." I looked at them and said, here's a basic rule of thumb I try to live by. When there's an angel and a devil talking to you, go with the angel every time. This is something we should do. And we should stop playing political games and trying to hurt the president and ignore the obvious solutions that we all should see. This is not a partisan issue. This is a humanity issue. Let's go solve it together. With that, I yield the floor. The absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Alexander.
Mr. President.
The senator from Virginia.
Mr. President, I ask that the proceedings of the quorum be dispensed with.
Without objection. Under the previous order, the Senate, having received the veto messages on S.J. Res. 36, S.J. Res. 37, and S.J. Res. 38, the messages are considered read and spread upon the journal in full en bloc. The senator from Virginia.
Mr. President, in a moment, I will ask unanimous consent for the Senate to take up and pass legislation I've introduced to help protect our democracy from foreign interference. Earlier today, Special Counsel Robert Mueller testified that the Russian government's efforts to undermine our elections are, quote, among the most serious challenges to our democracy, end of quote. A challenge, he says, that deserves the attention of every American. Mr. Mueller's testimony should serve as a warning to every member of this body about what could happen in 2020, literally in our next elections, if we fail to ask. When asked if he thought that Russia would attack our democracy again in 2020, Mr. Mueller said, "They are doing it as we sit here." Think about that for a minute. Special prosecutor who spent 2.5 years looking into Russian intervention in our elections in 2016 says not only are they going to do it, but they are doing it as we sit here. Now, if this was just coming from the special prosecutor, some folks might be willing to dismiss it. But this is exactly the same message we heard earlier this week from FBI Director Wray. It's a message that all of us have heard, and I, particularly on the Intelligence Committee, have heard repeatedly from Director of National Intelligence Coates. And we've heard this as well from other leaders of law enforcement and our intelligence community. And again, I point out leaders all who are appointed by this president who have sounded the alarm about the ongoing Russian threat to our elections. Unfortunately, in the nearly 3 years since we've uncovered Russia's attack on our democracy, this body has not held a single vote on standalone legislation to protect our elections. Mr. President, I'm not here to relitigate the 2016 election, or for that matter, to second-guess the special counsel's findings. This is more a question of how we defend our democracy on a going-forward basis. And the reason we need to do this, amongst a host of reasons, is just a month ago, the President of the United States sat in the Oval Office and, by dismissing this threat, effectively gave Russia the green light to interfere in future elections. Since then, unfortunately, my Republican colleagues have done nothing to prevent future attempts at undermining our democracy. So let me be clear. If a foreign adversary tries to offer assistance to your campaign, your response should not be thank you. Your response should be a moral obligation to tell the FBI. Mr. Mueller, the former FBI director and arguably the straightest arrow in public service, said as much this afternoon. So if the president or other members of his family or his campaign can't be trusted to do the right thing and report their foreign contacts and foreign offers of assistance to their political activities, then we need to make it a legal requirement. And that's what my legislation, the FIRE Act, is all about. The FIRE Act is a simple, narrowly targeted bill. All it does is make sure that attempts to interfere in future presidential elections are promptly reported to the FBI and the FEC. Let me be clear, the FIRE Act is not about prohibiting innocent contacts or the exercise of First Amendment rights. Contrary to some of the mistaken rhetoric we heard, it does not require reporting of contacts with foreign journalists or dreamers or official meetings with foreign governments. It is simply about preserving Americans' trust in our democratic process. If a candidate is receiving or welcoming help from the Kremlin or its spy services, I think the American people should have a right to know before they head to the polls. So consequently, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Rules Committee be discharged from further consideration of S. 2342, the Fire Act, that the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration, that the bill be read a third time and passed, and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Is there objection?
Mr. President, I object.
Objection is heard. Senator from Mississippi. Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. President.
Okay. Senator from Connecticut.
Mr. President, I want to thank my colleague, Senator Warner, and we will hear shortly from Senator Wyden. These two great colleagues are championing election security. Senator Warner at the helm as Vice Chairman of the Intelligence Committee has done as much as any American, any member of this body to uncover the serious Russian threat to our election system. And it's a threat not just from the Russians, but from other countries as well. And that's why I have offered, and I will shortly ask for unanimous consent for the passage of S. 1247, the Duty to Report Act. This legislation, like Senator Warner's, is based on a very simple idea. If you see something, say something. The Duty to Report Act would require campaigns, candidates, and family members to immediately report to the FBI and Federal Election Commission any offers of illegal foreign assistance. It differs in some technical aspects, for example, applying to family members from Senator Warner's proposed Fire Act, but it is the same idea because it codifies into law what is already a moral duty, a patriotic duty, and basic common sense. It is already illegal to accept foreign assistance during a campaign. It is already illegal to solicit foreign assistance during a campaign. All this bill does is require campaigns and individuals to report such illegal foreign assistance directly to the FBI. Today, Special Counsel Robert Mueller came before Congress to answer questions about his very comprehensive and powerful report, which documents sweeping and systematic interference in our election, and as he testified, to benefit principally the campaign of Donald Trump. But this measure is about the future. It is about preventing such election interference in the future and providing a mandate and a duty to report any offers of assistance from a foreign government like the Russian. This report outlines the most serious attack on our democracy by a foreign power in our history. It tells the story of more than 150 contacts between the Trump campaign and Russian agents. It tells the story of Russian covert and overt efforts to influence the outcome of our election by helping one candidate and hurting another. And it shows, perhaps most important for the purpose of this measure, that the Trump campaign knew of it, welcomed it, happily accepted it. Mueller testified this morning, quote, "Over the course of my career, I've seen a number of challenges to our democracy. The Russian government's efforts to interfere in our election is among the most serious. As I said on May 29th, this deserves the attention of every American." But equally important, just yesterday, FBI Christopher Wray came before the Judiciary Committee and warned that the Russians are still actively trying to interfere in our election. As Mueller said today, when he was asked about some of the remarks, some of the efforts in the Trump campaign, and he was referring to Donald Trump Jr. when he said, "I love it," in welcoming Russia's offer of assistance to the Trump campaign in the June 9th meeting, Director Mueller said, "I hope this is not the new normal, but I fear it is." This is the context of troubling comments that brings us here today, and one of the most troubling is President Trump's own comment. When asked if he would accept foreign help in 2020, and he said, "I'd take it." Quote, "I'd take it." Well, that is why we need the Duty to Report Act. If that kind of assistance is offered, there is an obligation to report it, not take it. 2016 was simply a dress rehearsal. With the 2020 election upon us, we must stop this kind of foreign interference and ensure that it is the American people, not Russia or any other foreign power, like China or Iran, who decides who the leaders of this country are and the direction of our democracy. So, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Rules Committee be discharged from further consideration of S. 1247, that the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration, that the bill be read a third time and passed, and the motions to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Is there objection?
Mr. President, I object.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President, I yield to another great colleague who has been a champion of this cause of election security, and I'm pleased to yield to Senator Wyden.
President.
Senator from Oregon.
President, I thank my colleagues, Senator Blumenthal and Senator Warner, have spoken strongly on the issue at hand, which is, to protect our country, our great country, and 200 years of self-governance, this extraordinary experiment in self-governance, and to do it, we have to add a new tier of strong protection for the sanctity of our elections. I want to thank Senator Blumenthal. He is a member of the Judiciary Committee, where he is doing important work on these issues. Our colleague, Senator Warner, of course, the Vice Chairman of the Intelligence Committee, where I serve. And I just want to thank my colleague, who is still on the floor, Senator Blumenthal, for all his leadership. I look forward to partnering with him and with Senator Warner in the days ahead. Mr. President, in a moment, I will be asking for unanimous consent to adopt a bipartisan bill that I have proposed with Senator Cotton. It is S. 890, the Senate Cybersecurity Protection Act. Before I ask, however, for that unanimous consent request, just want to give some brief background on why Senator Cotton and I are working on this issue and putting all this time into this effort. In the 2016 election, obviously, the Russians inflicted damage on our democracy by hacking the personal accounts of political parties and individuals, and then dumping emails and documents online. This tactic generated massive amounts of media coverage that was based on those stolen documents. It is clear, in my view, Mr. President and colleagues, that Russia and other hostile foreign actors are going to continue to target the personal devices and accounts, which are often less secure than official government devices. And you don't have to take my word for it. Top national security officials in the Trump administration have said virtually the same thing. Last year, the Director of National Intelligence, our former colleague, Senator Coates, told the Senate Intelligence Committee that, and I quote, "The personal accounts and devices of government officials can contain information that is useful for our adversaries to target, either directly or indirectly, these officials and the organizations with which they are affiliated. Likewise, in a letter to me last year, then Director of the National Security Agency, Mike Rogers, said that the personal devices and accounts belonging to senior government officials, and I quote, remain prime targets for exploitation. These foreign intelligence threats are not just aimed at the executive branch. Last year, a bipartisan Senate working group examined cybersecurity threats against senators. In their November 2018 report, the working group revealed that there was mounting evidence that senators are being targeted for hacking, which could include exposure of personal data. Likewise, Google has now publicly confirmed that it has quietly warned specific senators and Senate staff that their personal email accounts were being targeted by state-sponsored hackers. Unfortunately, the Sergeant at Arms, an office that's tasked with protecting the Senate's cybersecurity, is currently barred from using its resources to protect the personal devices and accounts of senators and their staff, even if senators and staff are being targeted by foreign spies and hackers. So that is why, on a bipartisan basis, Senator Cotton, who also serves on the Intelligence Committee with me and with Senator Warner, who spoke earlier, Senator Cotton and I introduced legislation to permit the Sergeant at Arms to provide 100% voluntary cybersecurity assistance to senators and staff. Our bill, Mr. President, is modeled after a provision in the recently passed Senate Intelligence Authorization Bill, which permits the Director of National Intelligence to provide voluntary cyber help to protect the personal devices and accounts of intelligence community employees. Fighting back against foreign interference means securing every aspect of our democracy, including the personal accounts and devices of elected officials. I feel strongly that the majority leader, our colleague from Kentucky, must stop blocking this common sense legislation and allow this body to better defend itself against foreign hackers. And Mr. President, I now ask unanimous consent the Rules Committee be discharged from further consideration of S-890, the Senate Cybersecurity Protection Act. The Senate proceed to its immediate consideration. The bill be read a third time and passed, and the motions to reconsider be considered, made, and laid upon the table with no intervening action or debate.
Is there objection?
Mr. President, I object.
Objection is heard.
Mr. President, I note again there's been an objection, and I would only state that I don't see how anyone can consider what I have proposed to be a partisan issue. Our colleague from Arkansas, a military veteran, Senator Cotton, and I have joined in an effort which I would just say to the senators that are on the floor is going to be one of the great threats of our time, because these personal devices are what we know hostile foreign actors are going to be targeting. They began to show what the opportunities were in the last election. Now we know that those opportunities are going to grow exponentially as devices become more sophisticated in the days ahead. So I only want to pass on that I think this is regrettable, and there's been an objection, and I just hope that we'll be able to pass this bill before more people are hurt. With that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.